I should have kept walking that night, because some lives are not meant to be saved by ordinary girls like me. At 2:17 in the morning, St. Mercy Hospital looked less like a place of healing and more like a tired animal trying to breathe under fluorescent lights. The halls were quiet, but not peaceful. Hospitals are never really peaceful. Even silence there has a pulse. A machine beeping behind a closed door. A cart wheel squeaking somewhere far away. The soft hum of lights that had seen too much and forgiven nothing. My name is Grace Miller, and by then I had been awake for almost 20 hours. My coffee had gone cold around midnight, but I kept drinking it anyway because habit can feel like survival when your body has nothing left to give. My sneakers were damp. My scrubs smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. My hands ached from charting, lifting, cleaning, comforting, pretending I was fine when every bone in me wanted to go home and fall asleep still wearing my coat. Outside, the storm pressed against the hospital windows like it wanted in. New York rain is never gentle. It slaps the pavement, blurs the traffic lights, turns every street into a mirror for people too tired to look at themselves. I had just clocked out and stepped through the side exit near the old emergency bay, the one we barely used anymore except for overflow and bad nights, when I heard something. Not a scream, not a call for help. Just a sound so small I almost missed it. A breath. Broken. Uneven. Human. I stopped with one hand on my umbrella and the other gripping my car keys between my fingers the way every woman learns to do when walking alone after midnight. The employee lot stretched ahead of me, slick and empty beneath the yellow security lamps. My Honda sat 3 rows away, a dented silver shape, waiting under the rain. I told myself to keep moving. I told myself it was probably a stray cat, or the wind pushing through the old loading dock, or my exhausted mind making ghosts out of shadows. Then I heard it again. Lower this time. Closer. Coming from the black SUV parked beside the ambulance entrance, where no one was supposed to park. It was massive, polished even under the storm. The kind of vehicle that did not belong near the staff exit of a county hospital. Its windows were tinted so dark they reflected the lights like black glass. Something about it made my stomach tighten. I took one step toward it, then another. Rain slipped down the back of my neck. My heart started counting faster than my feet. When I reached the driver's side, I saw the door was not fully closed. Just an inch open, enough for the interior light to glow weakly against the leather seats. I should have called security. I should have turned around. Instead, I pulled the door open. A man was inside, slumped against the seat, one hand resting near his chest, his face pale beneath dark hair, his expensive black suit soaked through at the collar. He looked impossible there, too elegant for fear, too powerful for weakness, like someone had dragged a king out of his throne and left him under hospital lights to learn what mortality felt like. His eyes opened for half a second.
Blue. Cold. Terrifying.
Then his breath caught, and the nurse in me moved before the woman in me could run. I do not remember deciding to help him. I only remember my body moving, fast and certain, while my mind tried to catch up with the danger standing in the rain beside me. I checked his pulse first.
Weak.
Too slow. Wrong in a way that made the air leave my lungs. His skin was cold beneath my fingers, and when I leaned closer, I smelled rain, expensive cologne, leather, and something metallic enough to make every warning inside me wake up. I had worked emergency rooms long enough to know when a person was seconds away from slipping somewhere I could not follow. "Sir, can you hear me?" I asked, pressing 2 fingers against his wrist. His eyes opened again, barely. Those blue eyes found mine with terrifying focus, as if even halfway unconscious, he was still measuring threats. "No police," he whispered. His voice was rough, low, almost swallowed by the storm. I stared at him. That should have been enough to make me step back. Innocent people do not say that first. But dying people do not get background checks before being saved. They get pressure, oxygen, a chance. I looked toward the hospital doors, then back at him. "You are at a hospital," I said. "You do not get to negotiate being alive." He tried to move, failed, and his face tightened with a pain he refused to show. That refusal scared me more than a scream would have. It was controlled, practiced. Like weakness was a language he had trained himself never to speak. I ran to the wall phone beside the old ambulance bay and called in a private trauma alert under code gray, the kind we used when someone needed help fast but the waiting room did not need to panic. Then I grabbed a wheelchair from the entrance and fought the storm to get him out of the vehicle. He was heavier than he looked, tall and broad-shouldered, all tailored fabric and dead weight. My muscles burned as I braced him against me, one arm across my shoulders, rain dripping from his hair onto my scrubs. For one impossible second, his hand closed around my wrist. Not hard, not cruel, just desperate enough to stop me. They followed me, he breathed. I looked over my shoulder at the empty lot, at the yellow lights flickering against the rain, at every shadow that suddenly felt alive. Then we moved faster, I said. Inside the old emergency bay, the fluorescent lights made him look even paler. I cut away the jacket sleeve and found no wallet, no license, no hospital bracelet, nothing that told me who he was. Only a black ring on his right hand, heavy and smooth, marked with a single silver letter C. I noticed details because details keep you calm when fear wants to take over. Custom shoes. Cufflinks worth more than my rent. A watch that probably cost more than my car. And a man who had no name. I placed monitors, started oxygen, called for supplies, and kept talking because silence felt too much like surrender. Stay with me. Look at me. Breathe when I tell you to breathe. His pulse dipped once, then again, and the machines began to protest in sharp, accusing beeps. No, I said, more to the room than to him. Absolutely not. Not tonight. You do not get to die on my shift. I pressed my hand over his chest, counted, listened, adjusted, pushed back against the invisible line trying to take him. 3 seconds passed. Then 4. The world narrowed to the rise of his ribs, the sound of the monitor, and the rain hammering the glass like 1,000 impatient fists. Then his heart found its rhythm again. Weak but there. Stubborn but there. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. His eyes opened just enough to find me one more time. For the first time, he did not look powerful. He looked human. And somehow, that was worse. The machines had barely settled into a steady rhythm when the old emergency bay changed. I felt it before I understood it. The air tightened. The hallway outside went too quiet, the kind of quiet that does not happen by accident in a hospital.
No rolling carts.
No tired laughter from residents. No distant voice calling for more gauze or another set of vitals. Just silence, heavy and deliberate, pressing against the glass doors. I turned from the monitor with a roll of tape still in my hand. 6 men stood beyond the entrance, all in black suits darkened by rain, shoulders squared, faces unreadable beneath the pale emergency lights. They were not hospital security. Security at St. Mercy wore navy jackets, badge shoes, and expressions of mild regret. These men moved like they had been trained to enter rooms without asking permission. One of them lifted his hand toward the door scanner, and before I could decide whether to scream, the lock clicked open from the inside. I had no idea who let them in. That scared me almost as much as their arrival. The tallest one stepped forward first, silver hair cut close, a scar slicing through one eyebrow, his eyes moving over me. The bed, the monitors, the open supply trays, the rainwater puddled across the floor. Then his gaze landed on the man I had just pulled back from the edge, and something like relief flickered across his face before disappearing behind discipline. "Sir," he said, not loudly but with the kind of respect people do not fake. The man on the bed did not open his eyes. His pulse stuttered on the monitor. I stepped between them before I could think better of it. "No," I said, holding up one hand. "Nobody touches him until I know who you are." The silver-haired man looked at me as if I had just done something either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. "Miss," he said carefully, "you need to step aside." "Nurse," I corrected, my voice sharper than I expected. "And you need to back up. This is a hospital, not a private club." 2 of the men exchanged a look. Not amused. Not angry. Worse.
Surprised.
I hated that my knees were shaking. I hated that my hand still knew exactly where the nearest panic button was, even though some instinct told me pressing it would not save me from whatever had just walked through that door. The silver-haired man lowered his voice.
You do not understand who this is.
I looked back at the man in the bed, at the black ring with the silver C, at the expensive shirt cut open beneath the harsh lights, at the face that, even unconscious, seemed used to command. Then I looked at the men who had arrived like a storm wearing tailored suits. I am starting to, I said. His eyes narrowed, not with anger, but assessment. Before he could answer, the patient moved. Just a shift of his fingers against the sheet, but every man in the room noticed. The silver-haired one straightened instantly. The monitors beeped faster. I turned, leaning over him, checking his breathing, checking his pupils, doing my job because it was the only thing keeping fear from swallowing me whole. His eyes opened. Blue, unfocused for one heartbeat, then suddenly clear enough to cut through the room. They did not go to the men first. They went to me. For a second, nobody breathed. Then he spoke, barely above a whisper, but every man heard it like an order. Did they see your face? I blinked.
Who?
His gaze held mine, cold and fever-bright, and filled with something I did not yet understand. The men who will come, because you kept me alive. My mouth went dry. Behind me, the silver-haired man said quietly, Mr. Cross, we need to move you. Mr. Cross. The name hit the room before it hit me. Nathaniel Cross. I had heard it on the news, in lowered conversations at diners, in the nervous jokes of ambulance drivers who knew which neighborhoods to avoid after midnight.
Not a businessman.
Not a donor. Not some wounded stranger with bad luck and expensive taste. The man I had saved was the one half of New York feared, and the other half pretended not to know. My fingers tightened around the rail of the bed. Nathaniel watched the realization move across my face, and for the first time since I found him in that SUV, he looked almost sorry. Then he said the words that made my entire life split cleanly in two. Grace Miller, you should not have opened that door. For 1 second, all I could hear was the rain, not the monitor, not the men in black suits shifting behind me, not my own breath turning thin in my chest. Just the rain tapping against the ambulance bay windows like thousands of small warnings arriving too late. Nathaniel Cross knew my name. That should not have mattered more than the men surrounding us, or the fact that the most feared man in New York was lying in front of me with an intravenous line in his arm and my fingerprints all over his chart. But it did. My name in his mouth made the room feel smaller. I stepped back from the bed, slow enough not to look like panic, fast enough to put air between us. How do you know my name? I asked. My voice came out steady, which felt like a small miracle.
His eyes held mine.
Pale blue under the hospital lights. Cold, but not empty. There was pain there, buried deep beneath discipline, and something sharper than pain. Calculation. Your badge, he said. I looked down. Grace Miller, registered nurse, clipped crookedly to my scrub top, half hidden beneath rainwater and a smear of antiseptic. Of course he had seen it. Even half conscious, even bleeding strength into white sheets, Nathaniel Cross had been reading the room. Reading me. The silver-haired man moved closer. Mr. Cross, we have a secure vehicle outside. We can get you to Dr. Bellamy within 12 minutes. No, I said before Nathaniel could answer. All 6 men looked at me. I wish they would stop doing that. He is not stable enough to be moved. His blood pressure is still too low, his heart rhythm is not where I want it, and if you put him in a car right now because you're scared of paperwork, you may lose him before you reach the bridge. The silver-haired man opened his mouth. Nathaniel lifted one finger.
Barely.
A weak movement. Still, the man went silent immediately. That was the first time I understood what power looked like when it did not need volume. Nathaniel did not have to raise his voice. He did not even have to sit up. The room obeyed him anyway. His gaze returned to me. You are very direct for someone who should be afraid.
I am afraid, I said.
I just have priorities. Something moved across his face. Not a smile. He seemed too tired for that. But the edge of his expression changed, softened by half an inch. A dangerous man noticing a small truth. And what are your priorities, Grace Miller? Keeping my patient alive. Then walking to my car and pretending this night never happened. Behind me, one of the men gave a quiet breath that might have been disbelief. Nathaniel did not look away. You cannot pretend your way out of this. I hated how calm he sounded. I hated it because calm meant he knew more than I did. Calm meant the storm outside was nothing compared to the one already moving toward me. I crossed my arms to hide the tremor in my hands. I did not ask who you were. I did not call the police. I did not tell anyone anything. I found a man who needed help, and I helped him. That is all this is. No, he said softly. That is what it was before they saw the light on in the bay. My stomach dropped. The silver-haired man looked toward the door. Another man touched his earpiece and turned slightly away, speaking too low for me to hear. I followed their eyes to the parking lot beyond the glass. At first, I saw only rain and reflected yellow lamps. Then headlights appeared at the far entrance. One car, maybe two, moving too slowly. Not parking. Watching. The skin along my arms tightened. Nathaniel tried to push himself higher against the pillow, and the monitor objected with a sharp beep. I moved on instinct, pressing one hand to his shoulder.
Stay down, I ordered.
His eyes flicked to my hand, then back to my face. Any other man might have looked offended. Nathaniel Cross looked almost fascinated. You should not touch dangerous things, he murmured. I checked the monitor and adjusted the oxygen line, then stopped almost dying in my emergency bay. For the first time, the silence broke around us in a way that felt human. Not laughter, exactly. A breath. A flicker. Even the silver-haired man looked away, as if hiding a reaction. But Nathaniel only watched me, and something in his stare made my pulse stumble. Not because he was handsome.
He was.
Objectively, unfairly, like a portrait painted by someone who believed danger had a face. But that was not what unsettled me. It was the way he looked at me like I had become a question he did not know how to answer. The headlights outside stopped. The silver-haired man said, "We are out of time." Nathaniel did not look at him. His voice dropped lower. "Grace, listen carefully. From this moment on, you do not walk alone." I let go of his shoulder, as if the words had burned me.
No.
He blinked once. No?
No, Irapa.
You do not get to decide my life because I saved yours. His gaze sharpened. If I do not, someone worse will. The room went cold. Outside, thunder rolled over Manhattan like a warning written in the sky. Nathaniel reached for the black ring on his hand, turned it once, and looked at the men behind me. Get her car moved. Clear the staff exit. Find out who followed me here. Then his eyes came back to mine, quieter now, almost regretful. And keep Grace Miller breathing, even if she hates me for it. I wanted to believe Nathaniel Cross was exaggerating. Dangerous men made danger sound larger than life because fear was currency to them, and I had spent enough nights in emergency rooms to know that powerful people often confused control with care. But when the headlights at the far end of the lot went dark and two of his men moved toward the glass doors without making a sound, something inside me stopped arguing. The silver-haired man, whose name I still did not know, gave quiet instructions into his earpiece, while another man stepped beside me as if my body had become part of their security plan. I hated it immediately. I hated the way they surrounded me without touching me. I hated the way Nathaniel watched the doors and not his own monitors. I hated that he was barely strong enough to sit up, yet every man in that room still waited for his permission to breathe. My car, I
said.
Nobody answered. My voice sharpened. My Honda is parked 3 rows out. It is not a chess piece. It is my car. Nathaniel turned his head slowly toward the silver-haired man. Vincent. The man looked at me with professional patience. We are moving it somewhere safe, Miss Miller. Nurse Miller, I said. And safe for whom? His expression did not change. For you. That should have comforted me. It did not. Comfort has to ask permission. Control just arrives wearing a suit. I moved back to Nathaniel and checked his blood pressure because anger needed somewhere to go, and my hands understood nursing better than panic. His numbers were better, but not good. His skin still held that pale, winter light of a person who had come too close to the edge and not fully returned. He watched me tighten the cuff around his arm. You are angry, he said. Brilliant diagnosis. The corner of his mouth shifted, almost invisible. I did not know Mafia bosses had a sense of humor, I added. I do not. Then, why are you almost smiling? Because you're the first person in 10 years to speak to me like I am a problem instead of a punishment. I looked down at the monitor, pretending the sentence had not landed somewhere too close to my ribs. Do not make this poetic. I am tired. I am wet. My coffee is in my locker, and you have turned my hospital into a spy movie. This is not a spy movie. Of course not, I said. The production value is too expensive. Behind me, one of the men coughed once, quickly, like he was covering a laugh. Nathaniel did not laugh. He studied me with those cold blue eyes, and for one strange second the room forgot to be terrifying. Then the side door opened, and one of his men came in holding my keys sealed inside a small plastic evidence bag.
I stared at them.
Where did you get those? From your bag, Vincent said. We needed to move quickly. You went through my bag. My voice rose before I could stop it. You had no right. Nathaniel said my name, quieter than before.
Grace.
Do not grace me. I pointed at him, and every man in the room seemed to tense at once. I saved your life because that is who I am. That does not mean you get to step into mine and rearrange it. Your car was visible from the street. Your address is on your registration. If they followed me here, they can follow you home. Then call the police. The silence that followed was answer enough. Nathaniel leaned back against the pillow, exhaustion shadowing his face, but his voice stayed steady. The police cannot protect you from people they do not know are already watching. I wanted to argue. I wanted a world where rules worked, where badges and hospital doors and doing the right thing were enough. But outside, rain slid over black glass, and somewhere beyond those doors, my ordinary life had become a map in someone else's hands. Vincent stepped forward and placed a plain white envelope on the counter. Temporary apartment. New phone.
Cash. No.
I said it before he finished. Nathaniel closed his eyes for half a second, like patience cost him more than pain. You are refusing help. I am refusing ownership. His eyes opened. The words hit him.
I saw it.
A flash of something raw and old beneath the calm. I would never own you. Then stop acting like my choices belong to you. The monitor beeped between us.
Then.
Fluorescent lights. 6 silent men. One wounded king who suddenly looked less offended than afraid. Not for himself. For me. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. I have enemies who would turn your kindness into a weapon against me. I wish that were not true. But wishing has never saved anyone. I swallowed hard. And what saves people in your world? He looked at me for a long moment. Loyalty. Silence. And knowing when to stop pretending you are safe. The words settled over me like cold water. I looked at the envelope. Then at my keys. Then at Nathaniel Cross, the man I had pulled from a black SUV because I heard one broken breath in the rain. I still did not take the envelope, but I stopped saying no. If this emotional mafia romance has pulled you into Grace and Nathaniel's dangerous world, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us what you would do in her place. Keep watching until the end, because this mafia boss story, forbidden love, protective romance, and dark romance, twist are only beginning. By sunrise, my life looked almost the same from the outside. That was the cruelest part. The city still steamed under the last of the rain. St. Mercy still smelled like disinfectant, burnt coffee, and overworked hope. Nurses still moved through the halls with tired eyes and pockets full of pens they would lose before lunch. I still had sore feet, damp hair, and a locker that never closed unless I hit it twice with my palm. But everything had changed. My Honda was gone from the lot, replaced by a black sedan idling near the staff exit with a man inside who pretended not to watch me. My phone had a new number programmed into it under the name Vincent, emergency only, as if anything about my life had ever been important enough to have emergency contacts with silent men in tailored coats. Nathaniel had been moved before dawn, not by ambulance, not through the front doors, not through any system the hospital would admit existed. One moment he was in the private trauma bay, pale and impossible beneath white sheets. The next, the bed was empty, the monitors cleaned, the floor dry, and every security camera in that hallway had suffered what administration called a temporary outage. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt erased. I went back to work because bills do not pause for fear. By 8 in the morning, I was checking vitals on a retired school bus driver with pneumonia. By 10, I was arguing with a resident who thought kindness was optional if you had enough letters after your name. By noon, my hands had stopped shaking, but only because exhaustion had become stronger than panic. Then the strange things began. The charge nurse, who usually snapped at me for overtime, handed me a hot breakfast sandwich and told me to take 10 minutes. The landlord, who had ignored my broken apartment lock for 3 months, sent a message saying a repairman had already fixed it. My overdue electricity bill showed a zero balance. At 2:30, a little boy from pediatrics named Caleb was approved for a specialist consultation his mother had been begging for since November. Anonymous donation, the social worker whispered, wiping her eyes in the supply closet because hospitals teach you to cry where the patients cannot see. I stood there holding a stack of forms, and all I could think about was a wounded man with cold blue eyes telling me wishing had never saved anyone. I told myself it was manipulation. I told myself powerful men did generous things only when generosity served a purpose. But that night, after my shift finally ended, I found an envelope inside my locker. No cash.
No apartment keys.
Just a folded copy of an old newspaper clipping, brittle at the edges, with a photograph of Nathaniel much younger, maybe 25, standing outside St. Mercy in a black coat, his face carved from grief. Beside him was the headline about a young woman named Lily Cross who had died after a delayed emergency response during a citywide blackout. I read the article 3 times before the words settled into meaning. His sister. His only family, according to the paper. She had been brought to this hospital and lost before anyone knew who she was. At the bottom of the clipping, written in neat black ink, were 4 words. Now you know why. I sat on the bench in the locker room until the lights flickered off and back on above me. Suddenly, the man from the SUV was not just danger wrapped in an expensive suit. He was a brother who had arrived too late once and had built an empire out of never being too late again. I wanted that not to matter. I wanted his grief to stay separate from mine, his world separate from my hands, his protection separate from my choices. But when I walked outside and saw the black sedan waiting under the street lamp, I did not feel trapped the way I expected. I felt seen, and that frightened me more. I did not call Vincent that night. I called Nathaniel. My thumb hovered over the number for almost 5 minutes while I sat in the back seat of the black sedan, watching Manhattan smear itself across the rain-streaked window in streaks of gold and red. The driver did not ask where I wanted to go. He already knew. That should have made me angry, and part of me was, but anger felt different now. Less clean. More tangled. The newspaper clipping lay folded in my lap, like something fragile enough to cut me. Lily Cross. 22 years old. No identification when she arrived. System overload. Delayed response. A family notified too late. I had seen stories like that before, tucked into medical review boards and forgotten hallway conversations. Patients became charts. Mistakes became language. Families became signatures at the bottom of forms. But Nathaniel had turned one loss into a fortress. When he answered, he did not say hello. He said, "You read it." His voice was quiet, rough with exhaustion, but clearer than it had been in the emergency bay. I looked at the city outside and tried to imagine him younger, standing under these same lights with grief, so large it had nowhere decent to go.
Why did you send this to me? I asked.
Because you thought I helped that boy today to control you.
Did you?
Silence. Then a slow breath. At first, maybe. I hated the honesty more than a lie would have comforted me. And after? After, I remembered what it felt like to wait outside a hospital room and be told someone important had not been important enough in time. My throat tightened. Hospitals fail people sometimes, I said. I know. So, do powerful men. That answer settled between us. Not defensive. Not polished. Just true. The sedan turned onto a quieter street near the East River, where old brick buildings held their breath under the storm. The driver stopped in front of a private brownstone with no sign, no visible guards, nothing dramatic except Vincent standing under the awning as if he had been carved there. I should have stayed in the car. Instead, I stepped out with a clipping in my hand. Nathaniel was waiting inside, not in a throne room, not behind a desk, not surrounded by smoke and threats like the stories make men like him sound. He sat in a leather chair beside a tall window, one arm resting carefully against his side, his black shirt open at the collar, his face pale but controlled. The room smelled like rain, old books, and something clean like cedar. A lamp burned low beside him. In that light, he looked less like a legend and more like a man who had not slept in years. "You should be in bed," I said. "You sound like my nurse." "I am your nurse until someone with better judgment takes over." His eyes moved to the clipping in my hand. Lily used to say that I had no judgment. She was right. I stayed near the door. Distance felt safer, even if safety had become a word I no longer trusted. "Was she like you?" He looked out the window.
No.
"She was kind." The answer came so fast it broke something in the room. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the wound he carried without bandages. Not on his body.
Deeper.
Older. She would bring coffee to night shift nurses, he said. She kept blankets in her car for strangers. She believed everyone could be saved if someone arrived soon enough. His jaw tightened. One night, no one did. The rain whispered down the glass. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, but the words felt too small for the space between us. So I said the only thing that felt honest. "I am not her." His gaze returned to me. "I know." "Then stop treating me like saving me will fix what happened to her." For the first time, Nathaniel Cross looked away first. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of all the things powerful men bury because the world teaches them grief is weakness. When he spoke, his voice was barely above the rain. "You did not save Nathaniel Cross that night. You saved the man I buried with my sister." My fingers tightened around the clipping. "And now? Now I am trying not to destroy the only person who reminded me he was still there." The first mistake I made was believing confession made a dangerous man less dangerous. The second was believing I could walk out of Nathaniel Cross's brownstone and return to my life with only a new understanding of his grief, as if sympathy could build walls strong enough to keep the world away. For 3 days, nothing happened. That was how fear learned to breathe inside me. Not through alarms or footsteps or black cars in the mirror, but through normal things that felt slightly wrong. A delivery man who waited too long across the street. A phone call that ended when I answered. A woman in a gray coat standing near the hospital entrance twice in one afternoon, pretending to read the same flyer on the wall. Vincent told me to stop taking the subway. I told Vincent to stop treating me like cargo. Nathaniel sent one message each night, always brief, always controlled. "Are you home? Did you eat? Is the driver outside?" I answered only half of them because answering all of them felt too much like surrender, and ignoring all of them felt too much like lying to myself. By Friday, St. Mercy had returned to its usual rhythm of exhaustion and small miracles. Caleb, the little boy from pediatrics, waved at me from his room with a blue popsicle in one hand and a stuffed dinosaur tucked under his chin. His mother hugged me so tightly I almost dropped the medication cups I was carrying. She said the specialist was coming Monday. She said she had prayed for an angel. I did not tell her the angel wore black suits and frightened hospital administrators into sudden generosity. I only smiled and told Caleb his dinosaur looked brave. My shift was supposed to end at 7, but a flu wave hit the emergency room hard, and I did not leave until almost 11. The hallways had thinned. The storm from earlier in the week had passed, but the city still carried dampness in its bones. I was changing out of my scrubs when my phone rang. Unknown number. I should not have answered. Every instinct said, let it go. But nurses answer phones the way mothers hear crying in crowded rooms. We are trained by worry. "Miss Miller?" a woman said. Her voice was breathless, urgent, familiar enough to sound like one of our unit clerks. "We need you back at the East Service entrance. It is Caleb. His mother is asking for you." My blood went cold. What happened? "He is stable, but he is terrified. Dr. Harris said you were the only one who could calm him down. Please hurry." The call ended before I could ask another question. I grabbed my jacket and moved fast, guilt already overriding caution. The East Service entrance was not far, only down 2 corridors, through the old supply wing, past the loading area where the lights flickered and the walls smelled faintly of bleach and rainwater. I texted Vincent as I walked. Caleb, emergency. East entrance. Then I stopped. The message failed to send. No service. That never happened inside the main building. I looked up at the ceiling tiles, at the dead security camera above the exit sign, at the hallway suddenly empty behind me. My pulse began to climb. Grace, I whispered to myself, go back. But then I heard a child cry outside the service door.
Soft. Small.
Enough like Caleb to break every rule I had promised myself to follow. I pushed the door open. Cold air rushed in. The loading alley lay narrow and dim between 2 brick walls, wet pavement shining under a single yellow lamp. No child. No mother. No doctor. Just a black SUV idling at the far end, headlights off, windows dark as sealed eyes. The door clicked shut behind me. When I pulled the handle, it did not open. My phone had no signal. My breath turned white in the cold. Then the rear window of the SUV lowered 2 inches, and a man's calm voice said my name like he had been practicing it. Grace Miller. Nathaniel was right. You really are his weakness. I stood in the loading alley with my back against a locked hospital door and understood, with awful clarity, that fear has a sound. Not a scream. Not thunder. Just the low hum of an idling engine and a stranger saying your name too gently. My fingers tightened around my useless phone. The black SUV waited at the end of the alley, still and polished beneath the yellow lamp, as if the darkness itself had learned how to park. I forced myself to breathe the way I taught frightened patients to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Stay present. Stay thinking. Who are you? I asked. The man behind the half-open window gave a quiet laugh. Someone your Mr. Cross forgot to make afraid. He is not my anything, I said, but the words sounded weak even to me. That was the worst part. Not the danger.
The lie.
Because somewhere between the old emergency bay and Nathaniel sitting beside that rain-soaked window, I had stopped thinking of him as the monster in other people's warnings. The rear door opened. No one stepped out. The invitation was silent, and that made it colder. Get in, Miss Miller.
No.
Another voice came from behind me, closer than it should have been. Then tell him goodbye from here. I turned fast. A man stood near the service stairs, hands visible, face calm, blocking the only path that was not the SUV. He did not move toward me. He did not need to. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my throat. Then headlights flooded the alley from the opposite end. White, sudden, blinding. The man by the stairs froze. 3 black sedans rolled in without sirens, without drama, without wasted motion. Doors opened. Vincent stepped out first, one hand raised, voice quiet enough to terrify the air. Grace, come to me. I moved before anyone could tell me not to. Half running, half stumbling, shoes slipping on wet pavement, breath tearing in and out of me. Vincent caught my elbow with careful hands and pulled me behind him. Then Nathaniel was there. He should not have been standing. He looked pale under his black coat, one hand braced against the car door, his face carved from pain and something far more dangerous than anger. But when his eyes found me, the danger changed shape. It became relief. It became regret. It became a man realizing the cost of being feared was that people reached for the only thing he had begun to protect. Are you hurt? He asked.
No, y whisperat.
His jaw tightened as if my answer did not erase what could have happened. The man in the SUV spoke from the shadows. You have a choice, Cross. Finish the meeting tonight, or spend the rest of your life guarding a nurse. Nathaniel did not look at him. He looked at me. In that moment, I saw the entire city waiting inside him. Territory, reputation,
Old debts.
men who bowed because they feared what he could take. And then I saw him choose. Not loudly, not violently,
Just completely.
The meeting is over, Nathaniel said. The voice in the SUV went cold. You would throw away an empire for her? Nathaniel stepped closer to me, slow and unsteady, but no one in that alley dared mistake weakness for surrender. No, he said. I am throwing away the part of it that made me think losing her was acceptable. My throat burned. Vincent gave orders I barely heard. The SUV reversed into the rain-slick street and disappeared, swallowed by Manhattan like a secret returning to the dark. Nathaniel reached me then, close enough that I could see. Exhaustion under his eyes, close enough to hear the breath he tried to hide. I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to ask why men like him always turned care into war. But all that came out was his name. Nathaniel. He lowered his head, not touching me until I stepped toward him first. "You are supposed to be the woman who saved my life," he whispered. "But you became the only life I wanted to protect." And for the first time since that broken breath in the rain, I believed he was not asking me to belong to his world. He was asking whether he could become worthy of mine. If this Mafia boss romance kept your heart racing, please subscribe for more emotional storytelling, like this video, and comment what you would have done if you were Grace Miller in this dark romance situation. Your thoughts help shape future stories about forbidden love, protective romance, mafia romance, and powerful redemption arcs. Thank you for watching until the end, and for being part of this journey. In the next video, another ordinary woman will step into a dangerous world, and one impossible choice will change everything.